I reckon the best way to learn Excel is by the practical examples. So this is exactly what we are going to see in this video. We are going to create a project from scratch in Excel. We are going to build a sales report where we can register the transactions. We are going to learn some formulas, functions, and also compare. What is better to use, a function of Excel, or is it better to use pivot table to summarize the data? And on top of that, what is a pivot table? How to use it? How to do some charts in Excel and etc. We are going to see everything you need at a beginner level. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this project. And if you want to see more projects like that, just comment down below, give me ideas because I can bring more content like that one. But anyway, let's get started. To get started, just open up a blank Excel workbook, because from here we can actually build anything. We have those sets of blank cells, and I think it's important, guys. I don't want to rambling too much about theory. I want to be very practical in this video, but just because I think it's important to know, Excel has a lot of different tools. But you don't need to use all those tools. You don't even need to know all the tools Excel have. And in this case, if we go here up the top, we have the ribbon, how it's called. Or you can just say menu, okay? Navigation menu, etc. We have home tab, insert tab, page layout, formulas. And yes, I know that I skip one, that is draw, because this is not a traditional, standard menu of Excel. It's just a customizable menu that I add myself because maybe sometimes I like to annotate something here in the screen, etc. But it's not necessary, right? Basically, we have some menus here in Excel, and those menus serve as a purpose to organize the tools. Let's say if we go to the View tab, we have many tools related to the view mode. We can get rid of the grid lines. Grid lines are the lines that separate rows and columns, for example. So the tools that we have are split, separate, and grouped together into those different menus. And going down here, we have three things that are very important: formula bar, the cell name box, and the cell itself. If we go here to the left hand side, name box, the name box is going to show us the name of the cell, the coordinate. Let's say I click in any cell here. Let me go to right here. This is going to be the cell E5. But why is that? Because the name says. But on top of that, we can also check for the name, the coordinate, by using the reference of the column and also the row. We can couple together those two pieces of information. Column add to the row, E5. It's important because maybe we need to give some coordinate. Let's go please to the cell, O7. We know that cell O7 is going to be this cell right here, and etc. So it's easier. It's like a chess game, okay? We have the squares, and then we have the coordinates. It's easier to navigate through Excel. And the formula bar is important because we can click on the formula bar and type anything that we want to use. Let's say we can type some words like a name, John, for example, or we can build a formula. Let's say equals 1 plus 3. Hit enter, and Excel calculates the result for us. We can do it by using both formula bar and also the cell. I can do the same thing using the cell. I don't need to use the formula bar. However, there's sometimes the formula bar is easier to see the information because there's many times our formula is so complex, so advanced. It's using a lot of different information that it's easier to see everything by using the formula bar instead of this little area, little frame canvas that we have in the cell. But that's it. If I go to any cell such as D4, I can do the same. Equals 1, add to 3, and then hit enter. Excel is going to calculate the same way as before. But let me select a couple of cells, click, hold, and drag, and get rid of those cells by pressing delete. And if we go all the way down to the foot of Excel, to the bottom, we have the sheet name, our first sheet, that is usually called sheet 1, as we can see here, sheet 1. We can also change this name, but we can do it later. And if I click on the plus sign, I can add more sheets, but we can also do it later. And if we go all the way here to the right, we have different options to view our things here in Excel, but we don't need to mess up with those icons just for now. And right here we have the scroll bar. We can scroll to the left, to the right, upwards, downwards, and etc. to help us navigate throughout Excel. But anyway, enough talk, enough rambling. Let's create our project here. And for this project, I was thinking about something very practical. Let's say we can create a sales report. And by creating the sales report, we are going to learn how to create a table in Excel. That is a very important tool. And yes, it's not just the structure, it's not just the layout, it's actually a tool of Excel, table, format as a table. On top of that, we're going to learn how to do some formulas, some calculations, how to add new rows, new information into the table, how to create some summary to visualize, analyze our entries, data, rows, and etc., a chart, and so on. But let me start here with my table. What I always like to do is create a header, because a header, I think it's something important to help us identify what is going on our sheet. So let me click on the first cell, A1. Now we know the coordinates, A1, and give it a name. Let's say sales report of John. Okay, that's it. Hit enter to confirm. If we go again to the cell A1, we can increase the font size quite a bit. Let's use 24. However, if you want to use a different font size, be free to do so. I can also go to this B icon that stands for bold. We can make the font thicker, and I think it's easier to see. And now if I click into the paint bucket, I can change the background color. Let me use here a dark blue fill, maybe this one. But we have two problems right here. The first one, I only change the color of the first cell. And on top of that, the color of the background is quite the same color of the font text. So it's quite difficult to read. So what we can do to make it more visible, we can change the font color and also select all the first row, all the cells that make up the first row, and change then colors. How can we do that? As we saw earlier, we have the columns and also the rows, but we can also select the entire column by clicking on the letter, as I'm doing right here. I can do the same for the rows. I can select by clicking on the number 6, for example, to select the entire 6th row. All the cells that make up this specific row are going to be selected. But let's do this for the first row to select everything. And then we can go to the Home tab and change the fill color to the same exactly dark blue. Maybe like this one, okay. And as the font, we don't need to select all the cells within this first row because the font, the text is only included on cell A1, not on all the cells. So we don't need to change everything, but just the first cell. So we can go to the font color and maybe pick a color that stands out. Let me use this yellowish color. I think it's look very, very interesting. And on the second row, we can do something similar. However, this time I just want to use a shade of yellow, maybe like this one. And the cool thing about Excel, it's because it's very customizable. And what I mean by that is we can see that the rows have a certain length, a certain width that separates one column to another. The same is going to be applied for the rows. However, we can increase or reduce the lengths. So let's say I want to increase the height of the first row. I can go in between the first and second row. We have here this small line. They're separating the first and the second row. However, if we click exactly, specifically within this line, we can click, hold, and drag it downwards. Why downwards? Because I want to increase the length. I want to increase the height. If I do the opposite, click, hold, and drag upwards, I'm going to reduce the height. And I don't think it's a good idea for what I'm looking for. So click, hold, and drag downwards. It's going to increase the height. I want to do, in this case, the opposite for the second row. I want to click, hold, and drag upwards, because that way I can reduce the height. Now we have a very nice and interesting header for our template. Now we can move on even further. Let's say we want to create the actual report, the actual table that is going to contain our movements, our sales. We want to register all the sales. So how can we do that? We need to first start with not the informations itself, but with the headers, because our headers help us organize the columns. So let's say cell B4 is going to be my first header. And in this case, I want to start with the date. So date, and then I hit enter. When you hit enter in Excel, the selection moves down to the cell underneath. However, I don't want to move to the cell underneath. I want to move to the right because I want to continue to add new columns, new labels to this fourth row. However, how can I do that? Because let's say if I just go with my mouse, hover over the cell, click on it, of course I can select the cell. Very simple, click and we select the cell. But I want to use my keyboard to make it faster. We can use the tab. This is the key we can use to move to the right. So tab, Excel is going to move to the right. Let's say date is our first information. Then the second information, it might be something, let's say simple. I want to use the sales person that made the sales, that sold the item, and etc. And maybe we can go for the item itself, so item name, and then we can go with quantity. For this one, I'm going to use a short version for the quantity word. And maybe the price. This is something important. Unit price. Unit price stands for just one unity for the item. Let's say you sold 10 items, like maybe apple. You sold 10 apples. The unit price is $2, let's say $2. So the total amount is going to be the multiplication between the unit price and the quantity. So in this case, $20 is going to be the total, right? But we can do it later because that way we can learn how to do formulas in Excel. So let's go here to register our first sale. Let's say on January 1st of 2026, hit enter, we sold an item. And be mindful about the date, guys, because it may vary, depends on the country. Maybe sometimes we use first, the first number refers to the month, and the second to the day, and the third for the year. But we know that in some countries we have the opposite. We have first the days, and then the months, and then the years. So it depends on your country, on your language, and etc. But anyway, we can type in here the date, and as the salesperson, let's say we have John, tab, the item name sold was, let's say, laptop. The quantity was 3, and the unit price $499.97. Hit enter. The unit price is something that may require some attention because the price needs to use a currency. What currency we can use? It depends again on your country. So let's say I want to use dollars, United States dollars. How can I format this number to dollars? I can click on this number, go to the Home tab, and simply go to this icon, this $ icon. Because if I click on this $ icon, I formatted the number as what Excel called it of accounting formatting. But be mindful because my Excel is in English of United States, American English. So this is why when I click on the $, it automatically transforms the number into American dollars, right? However, if you are in a different part of the world, maybe you click on the $, and it formats into different currency. So Excel is quite kind of smart in this case, so it can identify where you are and format the number using the accordingly. But if you want to change the currency, let's say because you don't want to use the standard currency, you can go again to this field, and instead of using account, you can click in the down arrow. Excel is going to open up this quite large list for you, and you can go to the last option, more numbers formats. Right here, Excel is going to open up a dialog box with quite more options. Let's say we go to accounting, and as the symbol, I want to use a different one. We can choose whatever symbol we want to use. So we have many different options. So you guys can choose right here the symbol that makes sense for you. And by the way, just a matter of fact, what is the difference between the currency and accounting? The main difference is the layout. Just that. It's not going to change anything about the structure or anything about the calculations. No, it's basically the same. The only thing is, using account, we have a space separating the $ to the number. However, currency, everything is going to be coupled together. The $ is going to be next to the number. That's it. That's the only difference. I always like to use accounting because it's the traditional standard formatting of money. But anyway, you can use both, okay? Let me go to OK, and that's it. So basically our table is done. For sure, we can continue to add more columns to different information, let's say region, freight, price, and etc. But I'm going to stick with those options for now. And what I want to do is basically transform this range into a table, because right now we have just a range of Excel. A ranged is basically a combination of many cells. And our range right here starts on cell B4 and goes all the way to F5. So when we have this range, we can write down the range like B4, that is the cell to the top left, B4 to, we can use this colon, right? 2 dots, colon, F5. So this is a range in Excel. The first cell to the last cell, B4 to F5. This is how we read ranges in Excel. But anyway, how can I transform, convert, format this range into an actual table? And why should I do that? Because it has many benefits that I'm going to show you. So select everything, go to Insert menu, Insert tab, and all the way here, you can immediately find Table. Just click on this option, and Excel is going to open up a new dialog box that is called Create a Table. As we can see, the range is exactly as I said before, starting the cell B4 and going all the way to F5. And make sure you select the option, yes, my table has headers, because of course it has date, salesperson, item name, and etc. All those information are my header. And then go to OK. Excel is going to transform automatically the range into a table. And by doing that, we have many benefits. The first benefit is, if we go to the first blank row, the row underneath the first blank row, we have row number 6, and type a new information, let's say January 2nd, 2026, hit enter. The table is going to grow down one row because we added a new information in that new row. So the table range grows automatically as we add new information. And if I add one more row here, let's say January 3rd of 2026, hit enter, it's going to grow again. So this is the main benefit of using a table. And on top of that, the table grows and pushes with this growth, all the formatting of the numbers. Let's say I select the whole quantity, the whole quantity column, and change the fill color to a yellowish color. Let's say that one. If I add one more new row, January 3rd again, 2026, hit enter, the range is going to grow and is going to copy and paste the formatting of the current column to the next row. That's it. So this is a very huge benefit of using a table, because imagine if we have some formulas here to the right that are calculating the total amount, for example. Imagine you do the formula, the calculation over and over again every time you add a new row. It's going to be a very huge problem, right? But when we have a table, we don't need to do it because the formula is going to also be pushed out, copy and paste to the new rows, to the new range. And the same will be applied to all the other things. Let's say unit price. Within the unit price, we have a different format than we have on quantity, for example. On quantity, we have a number, and on unit price, we have a accounting format. And if we add here a unit price, let's say $99, hit enter, it's already going to be formatted as dollar. Very simple and very beneficial as well. This is why I always like to use a table in Excel. So let's say, again, all those sales here were made by John. John sold here a, let's say, table, and then he sold again another laptop, and then he sold a 4K monitor. Hit enter, okay. He sold just one table for $99, a laptop, 2 quantities, and the unit price again is $499.97. And as the 4K monitor, he sold 10 units for $120. Hit enter, and that's it. So with our table here, we can continue to add new sales, new rows, new information, let's say almost forever. We have a lot of rows here in Excel. And on top of that, let me just go now for the calculation. How can we calculate in Excel? We can create here a new column, and it's very important to calculate this new column to the right, immediately to the right, coupled with our last column, because if we skip some columns, let's say I go to column H instead of G, so I skip G, go to J, it's not going to be a connection between my new column to the table. So let me show you here an example. In the column J, cell H4, I'm going to type total amount, hit enter. That's it. It's just a range. It's just cells that are separately, they're nothing to do. There's no connection with our table. However, let me select this whole column, right click on it, and go to delete to get rid of everything. I go to the right immediately next to the unit price, that is our last column, and type total amount, and then hit enter. The table is going to be immediately pushed to the right in such a fashion to increase the length, the width, the range. The range now updates again. Now we have the new column included to our table. Again, one more benefit to use a table in Excel. And when we do that, and by the way, guys, I'm just going to click here in between G and H, click, hold, and drag to the right to increase the width of this column. Because on the other hand, if I have just a small column, I cannot properly see the name, the label of within that column. Like that. As the total amount, I want to calculate the total amount, that is the unit price times the quantity. So equals, we can click on the quantity. And when we use a table in Excel, I don't know if you guys already saw the difference, but instead of have the coordinate of the cell, in this case, E5, we have quantity. But why is that? Because quantity is the name of our column within this table. So when we use a table in Excel, the cells within it change their names to a more, let's say, more simple coordinate. I'm not just using cell E5. I'm using the quantity because the table is going to calculate everything. The first row, the second row, the third row, the fourth row, and etc. for the infinity. So this is why it's taking the quantity instead of the coordinate of the cell, because it's going to calculate the whole quantity times the unit price. And again, for the unit price, we're going to have the same thing. And another benefit on top of that we have with those ranges, those customizable, it's not customizable, but those different ranges is, let's say, if we sort our data, let's say John laptop is right here, but I sort in some way that it's going to be moved down to the last row, the reference is not going to be messed up. Right now, it's going to use the laptop, 3 unities, $500, for example. But if I sort the name, sort everything here, so this row goes to the last row, it's not going to mess up with my formula. It's going to update everything, even the formula. So the brains not going to be messed up, let's say. And then I can hit enter. The table is going to calculate automatically all the rows for me, all the items, all the sales, and etc. And if I go to the first cell, for example, double click on it to open up 1, 2, I can see that it's using the correct reference. The rows, the cells to the left, quantity times unit price. Now, to get off the cell, we can use the escape button. That is the ESC, right? Escape, and that's it. If I go to the third formula, 1, 2, to open up, we can see that it's not using anymore the quantity in the first row and the unit price in the first row, but it's using the values in the same row. So as we move the formula down, as we hit enter, the table copy and paste the formula throughout all the rows we have, and the range updates as well accordingly to the row we are. So hit enter again, or escape, doesn't matter, right? If we hit enter with on top of this formula, it's going to recalculate again. But anyway, as we have here as the total amount some formulas, I want to change the fill color to a dark gray, like this. Okay, guys, so we have now a very compact table, but we can create here with this compact table a very large data set, because we can type in here, we can insert a lot of different sales. So I'm just going to pause the video and I'm going to add maybe 4 or 5 more transactions so we have more data to work with. Okay, I just done here with more transactions, so we have more rows to work with. But basically, guys, I maintain the same products, the same items, laptop, table, 4K monitor, and I add a new one that is wireless mouse, just that. Let's say now we want to summarize this data. I want to know how much I sold in January, how much I sold in the year of 2026, how much I sold by category, by item, for example, laptop, table, 4K monitor, and etc. How can we summarize this data? How can we do that? Of course, we have some formulas and functions in Excel that can help us with that. For sure, we can do it throughout formulas. But I don't think formulas are the best strategy if you want to be fast, if you want to save time. Because we have a tool in Excel that is called pivot table. And this tool can help us summarize data easily. You don't need to memorize formulas. That's why I think it's very interesting to use pivot tables in Excel. But for sure, I think it's very important you to learn formulas, functions, and etc. But let's say here, I want to know what is the total sold by item name. We can go here to the right. Let me show you a quick example by using formulas first. So the formula that we need to use in this case is going to be the sum formula. Not exactly the sum formula, because the sum formula is going to add up the whole range. And in this case, I don't want to add up the whole range. I don't want to add up the whole total amount. I just want to add up the values that corresponding to laptop, for example. So let's start with the most easiest one, let's say sum. As the sum, we can do something very simple, that is grand total, enter. As the grand total, I can go with equals, and instead of select the first cell and then adds to the second, and then adds to the third, and adds to the fourth, and etc., it's going to take a long time to complete this task. So what we can do instead is, instead of selecting cells separately, like I'm doing right here, we can use a function itself. It's not a formula, it's a function. A formula is when we use equals and then select any cell and use any symbol that is such as the slash to divide one number to another, or the asterisk to multiply it, or the minus sign to subtract, or the plus sign to add. Those are formulas we can use, right? However, we have what is called functions, equals, and then we type in the name of the calculation, such as sum. Excel is going to give us a list of all the related functions to our search. Let's say sum, we have sum, some ifs, sum product, and etc. But for this case, let me go with just sum, because I want to add up the whole range with no restrictions. Double click on this formula, 1, 2, and it's very simple to use, guys. I can just either click, hold, and drag within the range I want to add up, because the sum is going to create here for me the reference, the table name, and also the column name that is going to be add up. Or, so we can either click, hold, and drag to select a specific range, or let's say you have loads of rows. Maybe it's not the best idea to click, hold, and drag. You can do, let me get rid of the formula, equals sum. You can go on top of the header, you can hover over, and you guys, as you guys can see, you're gonna be able to notice a arrow pointing down, a dark arrow pointing down. This is where you know the exactly spot to click to select the whole range you have within this column. And then you can hit enter. Excel is going to immediately calculate the grand total for this column. So look, we already have the grand total. And the very interesting thing about formulas, functions in Excel, they update immediately if anything changes. Let's say as the laptop here, we have 2 unities, but I'm going to change to the number 3 instead of 2. I didn't hit enter yet, but when I do it, as you guys are gonna see here, the grand total is going to be updated. So 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so it's updated. And this is a very interesting benefit of use functions, formulas in Excel. When we jump into what is called a pivot table, as I said before, no, we don't have this certain benefit to update immediately the values. But on the other hand, the pivot table has other advantages. But anyway, so this is our grand total considering the whole column. And for sure, if we continue to add new rows, the range is going to expand automatically. So right now it's using just this small range, but if we add more information, the range is going to keep pushing the limits, right? It's going to continue to grow downwards. And okay, now we did a grand total here, but what if I want to do a sum for just a certain product? Instead of use the sum function, we can use the sum if. Or we actually have 2 options in this case. We can do a sum if or a sum ifs with the s in the suffix. The only difference is the sum ifs formula allows you to use multiple criteria. Let's say you are not only looking for the laptop, but you are looking for a laptop that was sold by John on the January month. So you have 3 criteria. It's not just laptop, but it's laptop, John, and January. 3 different criteria, okay? But even though if you only have one single criteria like laptop, you can continue to use sum ifs. I always use sum if, no matter what, okay? I never use sum if, only sum ifs, because I think it's more complete. So why should I use a compact formula if I can use a more versatile or a more complete one? Doesn't make sense. And, oh, because a compact formula, it's easier. No, it's not. It's quite the same. Okay, so it makes no sense to use sum if, at least in my opinion. In this case, I want to add up only the laptop, hit enter. So how can we do it? Equals. Every time, guys, I think At this point, you already understand that equals maybe is the most important symbol of Excel, right? Equals, because we need to use equals for basically everything. Equals, sum, ifs, double click here, 1, 2 to select. Within this formula, we have multiple arguments. And the first one is going to be the sum range. The sum range refers to the values you want to adapt together. And in this case, I want to adapt the total amount. So as we learned before, just select the whole column. And then we can hit comma, insert a comma here. Be mindful because I am using Excel in English. So this is why I have to use comma. However, if you are using a different language, maybe you need to use semicolon. It depends, right? So check out here the arguments. You need to use exactly what the formula is telling you to do. So in my case, I'm using comma because it's telling me to use comma. However, if it's telling you to use semicolon, use semicolon. Criteria range, what is that? The first criteria range. The criteria range is where we have, in this case, the items names, the products, because I want to look for all the products and use only what is equal to laptop. Criteria range, let me go here to items name, and then comma. And as my first criteria, in this case, laptop. So click on the laptop here, up the top, and that's it, hit enter. What Excel is going to do is, every time, let me double click on the formula, 1, 2, so it's make easier to see here the formula working because we have those highlighted cells. Every time the formula sum ifs within this item name range finds laptop is going to adapt the value. Let's say, is the first row equal to laptop? Yes, it is. So this is one of the values is going to be add up. Is the second row? No, it's not. So it's not going to be considered. Is the third row laptop? Yeah, it is. So it's going to be also considered in the calculation. The fourth is not, the fifth is not. Okay, the sixth is a cell to add up again. So it's going to add up all those values here together and etc, etc, etc. Let me hit enter again to recalculate the formula. And in this case, we can change the formatting to accounting again. That's it. So the grand total is 11,000, but only for laptops, we have $80,000. Okay, guys, we could continue to do this using more criterias and etc. But I think it's good enough because I want to show you something different. I think it was necessary to learn those basic formulas in Excel because now we can compare with pivot table. If I just jump it in straight to the pivot tables, maybe you guys didn't realize the difference between formulas and pivot table, but now you guys have the knowledge. You acquired these two to compare. To activate the pivot table, we need to first select our table. Because if I go to any random cell of Excel, the Excel is not going to understand. But wait a minute. So you want to create a pivot table based on what? Based on this blank cell? It makes no sense. So we need to select first a table where we want to pull data to the pivot table, right? So just click on the table. It's not to click in the table, but to click on the table, right? There is a difference. And then we can go to insert pivot table, Excel again, like it always do. It's going to open up a dialog box. This time it's called pivot table from table or range. As the table is going to use, is using the pivot table 1, that is the standard name for our table. And let me just simply click OK, because Excel is going to create a new sheet for me here at the bottom. And again, it's going to be related to what we was talking about at the beginning of the video, right? The sheets at the bottom. Right here to the left, we have the pivot table 1, the first. However, right now it's blank. There's no information. And all the way here to the right is where we can select the fields that we have: date, salesperson, item names, basically the columns of our table. And what we can do with those fields, we can take one of those options, click, hold, and drag and drop onto our areas, fields that are the filters, columns, values, and rows. Let's say I want to see what we did earlier, the grand total. We can go back to the pivot table, take the total amount, click, hold, and drag within this name, click, hold, and drag in the name, and drop it onto values. The pivot table is going to calculate the sum of the grand total. And as we can see right here, this value matches exactly even the decimal places with our result. So it's way easier to calculate, to do formulas using pivot table, because the thing with pivot tables is the formula is running in the background. You don't actually need to know how to do a sum formula or a sum if formula and etc., because the pivot table does it for you. The only thing you need to do is where to click, hold, and drag each one of those options that you have. But let's say we want to be more specific, or we want to expand our pivot table, not only for the total amount, but for the items names. So I can click on the items name, click, hold, and drag, and drop into rows. Because as you guys can see here on the pivot table, we have exactly the same as before. We know how much we sold per by the laptop, let's say. Laptop, $80,179.82. Very simple, and it's way easier than the formulas. However, a disadvantage of the pivot table is if we update our table, our source, the changes are not going to automatically reflect into our pivot table values. So how can we do this update, for example, if we have new rows? You need to go here to data and then refresh all, and then refresh all. Very simple, click on it. And the pivot table, doesn't matter if you have 1 or 1,000 different pivot tables within this Excel file, everything is going to be updated for you, recalculated, right? So this is the process you can do. Of course, you don't need to do it all the time, just when you need to refresh the pivot tables. So guys, look at the difference between what we did before with formulas to what we did right now with the pivot table. I think the pivot tables are way easier to use. And if you want to create a different view, a different analysis, let's say you can just select this whole pivot table, select everything, click, hold, and drag. And then we can use some shortcut keys of Excel. Let's say Control-C to copy. We can skip one column, and the next one, we can use another shortcut key, that is the Control-V, to paste it, like that. Let's say instead of look for the total amount, now we want to look for the quantity. We can take here the quantity, click, hold, and drag, and drop within values. And I want to take out the total amount. So click on that and go to remove field. The pivot table is going to show us a different result. We have the items and the values, the total amount. But in the second pivot table, we have the items and the quantities. So we can compare and see, is the monitor, let's say the laptop, we have the largest total amount. So is this because we have the most sold quantities? No, it's not, because the most one is the wireless mouse, and etc., etc. And we can also change the type of calculation. Instead of see the sum of total amount, we maybe can see the average, for example. But let me show you here. Let me click, select everything, click, hold, and drag, copy and paste it here to the right. And I want to get rid of the quantity and take the unit price. Click, hold, and drag. Is the unit price the same for everyone here? No, it's not. And on top of that, we need to be mindful, because if we take any value to the fields, they are going to be add up. So in this case, wireless mouse does not cost $26. So something is wrong here, something is off. It's because Excel is doing addition of those values. And instead of doing an addition, I want to do a average, for example. So we can go here to the field, click on it, go to value field settings, and change instead of sum, we can use a average, and then click OK. That's it. Now we have the average. So it's more accurate, let's say. 4K monitor, the average 123.67, and etc. And on top of that, guys, we can also do some charts. Let's say we want to compare the total amount sold for each one of the items. We can simply click on the first pivot table because Excel needs to understand what is the pivot table you want to use to populate the chart. So select the first one, go to insert. And in this case, I think we can go with the most used chart of all the charts. That is the column chart. Click on it. Now we have a very basic chart, but it can show us a lot of information. We can compare by the height of the columns. What is the most sold item? What is the least sold one, and etc. So basically that's it, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this basic project of Excel. How can we do a very simple template, let's say sales report with some formulas, with some summaries, and etc. And of course, if you guys have any suggestions to the next videos, you want to learn something new, you want to learn something different, let me know, comment down below, because I see you in the next one.